Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. My name is Paul Harris and I'm president of the City Club's Board of Directors. I'm very pleased to extend a City Club welcome today to our presenter, Zack, president of the American Bar Association, who will give the annual Law Day address. In a moment, you'll hear more about Mr. Zack, but first a brief history on Law Day. In 1957, the then president of the American Bar Association envisioned a special national day to mark the American commitment to the rule of law. The following year, President Eisenhower established the first Law Day, and in 1961, Congress issued a joint resolution designating May 1st as the official date for celebrating Law Day. Recognition programs are sometimes held across the country either before or after May 1st, so we're official today in our celebration of Law Day. Annually, the City Club, in partnership with the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association, commemorates Law Day by addressing a topic of national significance. And that brings us to our distinguished speaker. I would like to introduce welcome to the podium our special guest, Michael Unger. To introduce Mr. Zack, you can hold off for just a little bit, but start to make your way up here. Mr. Unger is a partner with the law firm Ulmer & Byrne. He's head of the firm's litigation department, and he also happens to be the current president of the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association. Like the City Club, the Bar Association's president has a one-year term, and Mr. Unger has been very effective in furthering institutional continuity in the association's important work, including its collaboration with the Cleveland Municipal School District through a program known as the 3 R's. And people listening across the nation can't see these, but a lot of people are walking around with 3R buttons here today. Very proud of that collaboration. Mike, I'd like to welcome you to the podium.
Thank you, Paul. Twice now during my tenure as president of the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association, I've been invited by the ABA to speak about our award-winning 3 R's program. First, last summer, I traveled to the ABA's annual meeting in San Francisco to do so, and more recently, I addressed a group of bar leaders gathered in Chicago to discuss the unique success of our program here in Cleveland. And now, as I told the group in Chicago, asking me to speak about our 3 R's program is a little bit, which stands for rights, responsibilities, and realities for those who may not know, is a little bit like asking me to brag about my kids. I am very happy to do so, and there is much to be proud of with respect to our 3 R's program, which is now in its 5th year of operation and growing bigger and better each and every year. Consider the following facts. This legal community, with financial support from our Bar Foundation, now sends more than 500 volunteer lawyers, judges, and law students each month into the 10th grade classrooms in 19 Cleveland and East Cleveland city schools. We interact with more than 4,000 students this year, and the 3 R's students' passage rate on the social studies section of the OGT exam has soared by 31.9% since the beginning of the program. Stunning. Coincidence? I don't think so, and neither do the teachers that I've talked to. Of course, as you'd expect, it's not just a one-way street. For our members get a lot out of the program, too. I've been a proud, as Paul points out, a proud pin-wearing 3 R's participant since the very beginning, and every year since. This year I have the privilege of joining my teammates and helping to teach Mr. Alexander's class at Glenville High School. In fact, seated right over there at my law firm's table today is Mr. Alexander, and he's accompanied by students Matthew Houston and Jervon Campbell, and we welcome you to the law. And the fact is, as any 3 R's volunteer will tell you, when you have a teacher who's as engaged and dedicated as Mr. Alexander, who has those kids primed and ready for the arrival of our 3 R's team, and that month's lesson plan, you can't help but feel fired up every time you leave that classroom because you know you've had an impact on those students. Unless there be any doubt that we can make the business case for this program and what is good for our kids, good for our schools, and good for our bar association, is also good for our local business community, let me share with you what Joe Roman, the president and CEO of the Greater Cleveland Partnership and a member of our board, has to say about our 3Rs program. Quote, "Our city is robust with new investments and cranes everywhere we look today, but the true long-term health of our city and region can only be measured by the next generation's talent levels. High-performing schools, regardless of structure, are dependent on the resources only we as adults can provide, such as the amazing 3Rs program sponsored by the CMBA. It's an investment of time that can't be matched by dollars." How right he is. Which brings us to today. Now, I figured since the ABA had me travel all the way to San Francisco and Chicago to talk about our 3Rs program, it was about time that the ABA came to Cleveland to see for itself exactly what's going on here. The ABA's high visibility focus on civics education during this past year, of course, has come straight from the top. From its president, Stephen Zack. Now, as you're about to see, President Zack is a spectacular guy and a spectacular leader, except for one small issue. You see, he hails from Miami, where he is a distinguished partner at a prestigious law firm. And yes, he has confirmed our worst fears that he is indeed a Miami Heat fan. But we didn't hold that against him, and in a way that we figured any Miami Heat fan could appreciate, given his schedule, we exerted a good old-fashioned Cleveland-style full-court press on Steve, and to our good fortune, he agreed to be our 2011 Law Day speaker here at the Citadel of Free Speech. And boy, are we lucky to have him. Steve Zack has led the ABA this past year with unprecedented dedication and distinction. He's the first Hispanic-American lawyer to do so. He's the son of a Cuban mother and American father. He's focused his attention on civics education and on the importance of inspiring a new generation of lawyers and ABA programs that advance access to justice for everyone in the United States. This is what he said when he first learned that he was going to lead the ABA. "I am proud to be the first Hispanic American slated to become the president of the ABA. This country is still a land of opportunity. I want to work as an advocate for access to justice and also for the possibilities that can exist for all young students from all backgrounds. Under President Zack's leadership, the ABA is doing precisely that, pushing hard for a renewed focus on teaching civics education in the classrooms of America so that students truly understand why we have three separate branches of government. In response to a study that revealed that most Americans cannot name the three branches of government, Steve Zack was quoted as saying, "With every right that we have comes an obligation to understand those rights." Just last night, our Vice President and co-chair of our Law Day Committee, Carter Strang, directed my attention to a very timely New York Times article from just a couple of days ago entitled, "Failing Grades on Civics Exam Called a Crisis." It noted that fewer than half of American 8th graders knew the purpose of the Bill of Rights on the most recent national civics exam, and only 1 in 10 demonstrated acceptable knowledge of the checks and balances among the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, according to test results released just 2 days ago. Not surprisingly, President Zack immediately stepped up to the plate and responded to this in a forceful way with remarks that have received nationwide attention. Steve Zack's hope, and ours as well, is that a renewed interest in civics and an understanding of the role of government will not only create a more informed citizenry, but also increase student interest in pursuing a career in law. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a big deal when the ABA president comes to our town. It's good for our legal community, one of the finest in the nation. It's good for our schools. It's good for Cleveland and for all of Northeast Ohio. We are honored, President Zack, that you accepted our invitation to come to our great city to be our 2011 Law Day speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming ABA President Steve Zack.
That's quite an introduction. I can hardly wait to hear what I'm going to say. You know, they told me that the main reason I was invited is because they needed a speaker to deal with Cinco de Mayo and Law Day at the same time. And I was the only lawyer who was also a Hispanic that was coming to Cleveland on today, but that's not true. The truth is that it is a pleasure to come to Cleveland, particularly because of the role that the Cleveland Bar has played, the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar now. I look around the room and I see the leaders in the American Bar Association. There is no bar association in the country that has given more to the American Bar Association, from its presidents to its officers to its board of governors. I could really spend my entire time here talking about the individuals I see before me and the great job you've done, Mike, and the Cleveland Bar Association. It would be easy to do, and other people, and in a longer time, we should do that to honor this Bar Association for all it's done for the legal system. But today I want to talk about why being here was so important to me. Because the loss of liberty in my lifetime is not a theoretical exercise. In 1961, when we came from Cuba, the Cuban Constitution was identical to that of the United States. I keep a copy on my desk, both in English and Spanish, to remind me of that fact, that the words alone did not protect us. And today, we have just heard some of the statistics that remind us that the words alone will not protect us. 2 out of every 3 graduating high school students believe that the 3 branches of government are Democrat, Republican, and Independent. I'm wondering if there's a 4th branch called the Tea Party. But it is on one hand, something that we all shake our heads, but it's not funny. The truth of the matter is that this is the generation that will be called upon to defend our very democracy and the liberties we enjoy. And the fact of the matter is that we as a nation are 200 years old, a blink of an eye in the course of history. And I am not an alarmist in any way, shape, or form, but I am worried, and we all should be worried. And more than being worried about the statistics we hear, we must do something about it. And that's why I salute the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association and your idea about coming up with this 3-hour program. You know, my kids can always tell me about their rights. I presume your kids are similar. But they never can tell me about their responsibilities. And I will say that that's not unusual. I may have been in that boat myself at a time in my life. But I had the privilege of having a civics teacher whose name was also Mr. Alexander. His name was Macy Alexander. And I remember him to this day. And I'll never forget him. He was my 9th grade civics teacher. And he was a former Marine. And he made a difference in my life. He made me understand that what it meant to sing God Bless America. There was a young man who made the mistake of saying play ball after God Bless America. That person is probably still standing in front of the blackboard. But I learned from him how important the Constitution was, and the Bill of Rights is. And some other statistics that may concern you as much as the ones you've heard is that 75% of all Americans, not just students, do not know that the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, protects religious freedom. 75%. A month ago, Newsweek did a civics test of 1,000 Americans. 70% did not know that the Constitution is what our laws are based on. When the Bill of Rights was read to people on the street, and they were asked, what is the origin of this document? 50% said, it's a communist doctrine. Think about it. Think about which right are you willing to give up today? Each one of you can think about which right. Are we willing to give up the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment? Because we know, and history has taught us, that every right that is once lost is never regained. is never regained. So what are we going to do about it? We are going to go into the schools, like you're doing here, and we are going to establish an American Bar Academy, which we have established, which has already had meetings. For example, in Miami, we had 350 students that were taught civics by a Supreme Court justice and a mayor and a member of the school board. We have American Bar Academies that will be teaching civics around the country. And by the way, every single one of you today can go online, and anybody watching or listening can go online onto the AmericanBarAssociation.org and find civic lesson plans. All you have to do is read them. And all you have to do is go into those schools, and you will be rewarded by the students and by the smiles on their faces and by knowing that you're doing something to protect the next generation of Americans. Sandra Day O'Connor is on that committee. Justice Souter is helping us, Alan Copit, Midge Rundell, people that you all know and have heard from. And there's a place for each one of you to be part of that process. And we need each one of you to go out and talk to our students, to our next generation, to the defenders of our democracy. You know, I learned today a bunch of things and had a chance to talk to your radio station, and I had a chance to talk to the Plain Dealer. We spent an hour there, and we started talking about the cost of this program. This program costs $75,000 a year. I don't know how many people know that. A cruise missile, one cruise missile costs $600,000. 6 cruise missiles would allow us to take the 3-hour program and put them into the 50 largest urban communities in every state in this country. And where cruise missiles are necessary in some instances, but they're weapons of destruction. Think of what we could do to create with that money. And think of what we must do as a society to reorder our priorities. I ask each one of you, when you were in school and later in your life, do you remember the statement that we all said to each other? I don't agree with what you're saying, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Raise your hand if you said that in your lifetime. Okay? Have we all said that at some point in time? All right. Today, what we would say is, I don't agree with what you say. You shouldn't say it, and you're a bum if you say it. Where did we go wrong? Where did we go wrong? Where did we veer from the path of respecting the right of people to disagree with what we say? I'm going to finish my remarks by talking about 4 words in 2 letters. The 4 words are those inscribed over the United States Supreme Court. And I presume many of you have walked through those giant columns. And if you haven't, you should. And you should take your kids with you. And above there it says, equal justice under law. 4 words. That is a promise we make to all Americans. And it is a promise that is severely in jeopardy today. Equal justice does not mean equal justice for the rich, for the powerful, for the privileged. It means equal justice for all Americans. We have a justice gap in this country. 80% of poor people do not have access to our courts. 11 states have less than 1% of their entire budget dedicated to the courts. Courts are closing down around the country because they are not adequately funded. It's up to us to make sure that equal justice remains part of the fabric of America. Legal Services Corporation is so underfunded that today 1 out of every 2 phone calls goes unanswered. Unanswered. We are fighting to establish the rule of law around the world, as well we should. But the rule of law begins with one word: access. Access. And without access, there is no rule of law. And we talk about under law. What does under law mean? Now, that's where the two letters come into play. Because for most of the world, under law means the rule by law. For us in America, it will remain, hopefully, and always be the rule of law. What's the difference? Nazi Germany was one of the greatest countries who believed in the rule by law. Everything that Nazi Germany did was by law. What's going on in China today is by law. As I travel around the world, what distinguishes us is that we believe in the rule of law. The rule of law is based on our Constitution. And our Constitution is based on the fundamental principle that is the basic principle of law, that the law is there to protect the minority from the tyranny of the majority. And we will all be minorities at some point in time. And as Sandra Day O'Connor says better than anybody, she says in every society there must be a safe place. And in a democracy, that safe place is the courts. And the failure to understand the role of the courts ties directly back to civics. Chief Justice Roberts recently wrote an opinion in the case involving the funeral and the demonstrations at the military funeral. And Justice Kennedy, another great justice, in the flag burning case, Texas versus Johnson, also wrote an opinion. Both of them said, we find what these folks did abhorrent. We don't agree with them. We believe most Americans don't agree with it. But we have a Constitution that protects those rights. And we must protect those rights so that all of us will enjoy those rights. I'll leave you with the last day that I had in Cuba. And we had learned that the military had just come and taken our family business. And those of you who didn't experience what happened there, the minute they take your family business, they come over to your house and they arrest you and they put you in jail. And then there's a period of time that sometimes you get out of jail, sometimes you don't get out of jail, but it's a situation that always occurred. So we heard that, and we packed with a shirt. We didn't pack. We just basically left with the shirts on our back. And I asked my grandfather how he felt, because obviously he was a person who, in many ways, was suffering the greatest. And he said, of course I feel horrible today, but I feel good about one thing. I said, how could you feel good about anything, Grandpa, on a day like today? And he said, I feel good that I'm going to the United States of America. And I know that I will never be a refugee again, because if the United States of America falls, there'll be no place to go. Thank you very much.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to a Friday forum featuring Stephen Zack, President of the American Bar Association. We'll return to our speaker momentarily for our traditional City Club questions and answers. We would respectfully ask that you start formulating your questions now. We have a lot of lawyers in the audience, so I know we'll get a lot of good questions. Hopefully they'll be short and to the point, and we would ask you to try to keep them short and to the point so we can get a lot of questions in. Members and guests alike are welcome to attend City Club forums, and we hope that everyone listening will join the City Club and become active in our ongoing civic dialogue. We welcome all of you here and those listening to WCPN 90.3 FM, WCLV, WTAM, or one of the many radio stations across the country. Our television broadcast partner is WVIZ PBS IdeaStream. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC, and our live webcast is supported by the University of Akron. As we've noted, today's program is a celebration of Law Day and the rule of law in the United States. and it's presented in collaboration and partnership with the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association. I would like to acknowledge that we have several past presidents. In addition to Mike Unger, the current president, we have several past presidents of the Bar Association at the head table, as well as a past president of the Bar Foundation. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you for the robust partnership that we enjoy. We are also very pleased to welcome students who are here as part of the City Club student program. Mike acknowledged them earlier, but I'm going to do so again. Participation of these students is made possible by a generous grant from the Jeffrey David Epstein Memorial Student Fund. And with us today are students from Glenville, Shaw, and Lincoln West High Schools, and I'd ask you all to stand and be recognized. Thank you for joining us today. Now we would like to return to Mr. Zack for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphones today are City Club Marketing and Membership Manager Heather Sikora and Program Director Carrie Miller. First question, please.
Yes, sir.
President Zack. The stunning Citizens United case has left in its wake greater consequence to the question of disclosing where money is coming from in the political world. And I have been puzzled that efforts to enhance the requirement of disclosure of where funds are coming from in judicial races has specifically, that's what I'd like you to comment on, has met resistance. To me, that is that we need to know who is spending money on judicial races. They shouldn't hide behind several layers of shell organizations. This is particularly an issue in Ohio where we've had very controversial Supreme Court cases. I ask you to comment.
I couldn't agree with you more. I don't know where the resistance is coming from other than from the people who don't want to be disclosed. I think that there is always danger in the failure to have sunshine cast on those kind of situations. Particularly, we're talking about judiciary. I've been concerned about this ever since Republican Party versus White, which is a decision which said judges should be able to talk about, they have First Amendment rights, and should actually be able to answer questions how they would rule in a case. Those judges, in my opinion, should be recused. And in light of the issues that you raise and the financial effects on the judiciary, the ABA is doing something about it, I want you to know. We have a task force that I have, was actually in the second year, because the first year didn't finish up doing what they had to do, and that is to present a recusal position before the House of Delegates, which is coming up in Toronto right now. This has been a highly contested issue. Hotly contested issue, because some people believe that those recusal laws shouldn't exist. A recusal law, by the way, for people who don't know what it is who may be watching, is that a judge shouldn't sit on a case where they have some interest. There's a great book about this, by the way, that any of you want to read how bad the situation can be. It's called Of Oil and Honor, and it talks about the Pennzoil case and the elections in Texas. We know what happened in Iowa, and we know that what happens today is that a PAC, an anonymous PAC, comes into a state and takes one line out of a decision. In Iowa, it was a unanimous decision of the Supreme Court that was mandated both by the Constitution of Iowa and the United States Constitution. They took this one statement, poured an enormous amount of money into it, and had 3 judges removed, and they're trying to impeach the remaining judges. It's a real danger to our democracy whenever you have people lurking in the shadows. We have to bring them out into the open. If they want to accept that money, if they want to give that money, we live in a democracy. We're free to do what we want to do, but why should you hide from it? Why shouldn't people be told exactly what's going on so they can make their own decision as to whether the justice they're getting is a fair justice and equal justice? That's my thought on that.
First, thank you for your remarks. They were very interesting, very inspiring. And I found the statistic that 70%, I believe I got that right, of Americans believe that the three-party government is Democrat, Republican, and independent.
75% of all graduating high school students.
75% of all. So that statistic, it occurs to me that falls along political lines. And I wonder if there's a connection between civics education and then the professionalism of lawyers that participate in the political process and even in the justice process. As a self-regulating profession, what can we do as lawyers today to demonstrate the rule of law and attribute that to civics education?
An important question, and we can do a lot. One of my jobs as president of the ABA is to connect the dots, because a lot of the things that I talked about with you today, you've seen in different places. Civics in one place, the judiciary in another place, the statistics in another place. They're all connected. And what happened, because I asked myself the same question, how do we get where we are? What happened? It didn't happen by accident. So the answer to the question is that about 2 decades ago, we as a country decided that we were going to focus on science and math, which was a good thing. But there was unintended consequences. And the unintended consequences was that we stopped testing in civics. We stopped testing civics, so we stopped teaching civics. And you can graduate from a high school in the United States today with not 1 day of civics, not 1 day, knowing nothing about your government. So what we can do is what we're doing here with 3 Rs, what the ABA is doing. We know that the economic climate that we have and school board economics are tough. But you have donated, I understand, you have over 600 lawyers from what I understand, spending 40 hours going into these classrooms. And they've affected the lives of 4,000 students, 20,000 students over 5 years. That's what we can do. We can take what you're doing here and do it around the country. One thing I'll share before I go to the next question, because I found it particularly interesting, and I think you may want to have me share it with you, and that is wherever I go around this country or around the world, I always talk to the students at the law schools, always. And I learn a lot from their questions, just like I learn a lot from these questions today. And I was in China talking to the law school right outside of Beijing. And one thing that the students do is they Google you. And after they Google you for a reason. They also want to gig you. They want to make sure that they have something that they can ask you that you will find problematic. So I had just finished representing the Vice President, Al Gore, in Bush versus Gore. And they had gone online and seen that. So this young man stands up with a little smirk on his face. And by the way, they ask you all kinds of questions like, what do you think of No Child Left Behind and Crash and so forth. But this fella had really been prepared. And he stood up and he says, Mr. Zack, what did you learn from losing Bush versus Gore? And I think that it was about 5 minutes losing went on. I don't know if that was the Chinese losing, Mandarin losing, but it was clear what he had in mind. Fortunately, I could look at him and I say that, and this was also a problem because I had the political officer. They give you a political officer. They give you a political officer that sits with you wherever you go. And he's over here to the left. And I said, well, I learned that in the United States, when we have a problem, we turn to our lawyers and not our generals. At that point, the political officer got up and left. I wasn't sure I was going to get up and leave. But I appreciate these questions and would look forward to the opportunity to answer any of them that you have.
Mr. Zack, you spoke about the importance of courts, and certainly is a very important factor in our entire system. There's an old adage in the law that justice denied is justice delayed. Or it's the other way around, I think. Justice delayed is justice denied.
We know what you mean.
Thank you. There have been a number of scholars, a number of people in the federal judiciary who pointed out the shortage of people now serving on the federal judiciary. President Obama has nominated many people for these various vacancies on the federal judiciary, but under the system in the Senate, one senator alone can stop those appointments from even being heard. Do you agree that's become a problem in the way of a shortage of judges? And what can the American Bar Association do to break that logjam?
It's a problem I deal with every day. It's the blue card system. They can put in a blue card and they're done. Let me give I don't know how much time I have remaining, but this is very important. And I'll give you the status of the federal judiciary. Today there are 93 vacancies on the federal judiciary. One federal judge resigns every week. There are 26 federal district courts that have been declared emergency areas. The president has nominated 43 individuals. The ABA, and this is one of the most important things, and frankly I don't think of anything more important than the ABA does, that it has its standing committee on the federal judiciary where it vets all federal nominees. In most cases before they're announced publicly. In the Supreme Court, we do it afterwards. And actually, when I tell this to other bar associations around the world, they believe I'm lying. They do not think that it's possible that a bar association would. And I understand you here in Cleveland have made great progress in this area too. But what happens is the ABA gets it. I want you to know every one of the 43 have been vetted and have been sent back to the president. We have done it instantly. I talk to Bob Bauer on a weekly basis. Bob's a great lawyer, the president's lawyer. Work closely with. I was in his office on Monday of last week with our chair of our standing committee on the federal judiciary, Ben Hill, talking about how we can do whatever's necessary. We had 500 lawyers in Washington 3 weeks ago. We met with every senator and every congressperson, all the leadership, to talk about this issue. Last session, 18 judges went through and came out with no opposition on either side. So it can't be political, right? No opposition on either side. Couldn't get even one of them to the floor for a vote. Okay? This year so far we've had 17 go through. We're making some progress, but I can tell you that everybody has to do their job. And if any group does not do their job, then the system breaks down and we see the result. But we have a federal court system that's in crisis. We have an explosion of pro se cases. We have a bench that's vacant. We have a lot of senior judges who are working around the clock, but still we can't get folks to court. We have the speedy trial rule, which you know we have to comply with from a federal standpoint. So this is a very important business question. A lot of people don't recognize the business implications of the courts being closed. I'm talking about state courts and federal courts. We had a hearing in Atlanta to bring in Fortune 50 CEOs and economists to talk about the business reason that courts have to be open. And we have hundreds of millions of dollars today in question in court proceedings that both corporations would like to put on their balance sheets. That if they could put it on their balance sheets, they can create new jobs, a word that I think we've heard before, and new technologies, and all we have to do is have a court system that's fully functioning that can give a decision. So this is an important issue for all Americans.
President Zack, I imagine as the leader of the American legal community that you're asked to comment on basically every legal issue, every news matter that comes up daily. I wonder whether the American Bar Association put out a comment about the recent events in Pakistan this last week.
As president of the American Bar, I have the privilege of sending what's called a rule of law letter. And that's my decision by myself. However, you don't make any decisions by yourself. If at least if you do, you shouldn't. And if you did, you wouldn't be president. So I have two organizations, three actually. I have the International Law Section, which is about 26,000 members. I have the Human Rights Center, and I have the Rule of Law Initiative, ROLI, which we have 500 lawyers, boots on the ground in 40 different countries, working with governments to write constitutions and do things like that. So I coordinate with all of them to get their thoughts. And I sent rule of law letters both on the Egyptian issue and on the Libya issue. We did not send a rule of law letter because we had no problem with how the rule of law was resolved in that instance. We are most certainly, as all Americans are, I think, understandably of the belief that we, as Americans, follow the law, and we are better off today than we were.
Mr. Zack, thank you for coming to Cleveland.
Thank you.
The American Bar Association has for years taken a leading role in ensuring adequate funding and quality standards for both civil legal services and public defense. And I wonder if you could comment on a couple of things. One, how you see the picture of both sides of that right now, what the ABA is doing, and then also what local bar associations like the CMBA can do.
Yeah. Well, it's like the rest of any of our society that is impacted by the economy. There's also not a great constituency for that group. It's the American Bar Association and the people in this room that are the constituency for that group. And a matter of fact, Legal Services Corporation resulted in many ways from the activities of the American Bar. The American Bar has about 1,000 resolutions, but it only we have 9 full-time lobbyists in Washington, by the way. We got 1,000 employees. $100 million annual budget is what the American Bar Association is. It's the largest voluntary association in the world, 400,000 members. Sometimes we have 800,000 opinions. But it is an organization that has tremendous power, and we've used that power to speak out for those who have no one else to speak out for them, and that's what Legal Services Corporation is all about. With the foreclosure crisis, with the economic situation being what it is, Legal Services Corporation, to give you some facts, just some raw data. If Legal Services Corporation, which is funded at about $400 million today, had a $17 million cut, but it was a proposed $100 million cut at one time, we were able to push that back. But if it was funded at 1995 level with COLA increases, just COLA increases, it would be funded today at $650 million. Okay? It explains why 1 out of every 2 phone calls go unanswered. And I understand your IOLTA program here has been severely impacted by the economy. And frankly, it's why we, as lawyers, have to do more than we've done in the past. But it is not, in every, I talk to a lot of editorial boards who want to make it just a legal issue. It is not just a legal issue. Our society has an obligation, not just lawyers. I mean, I don't know of every 10th can of Campbell soup that's given away for free, or every 10th newspaper given away for free. Lawyers are giving, and supposed to give ethically, and many do, if not most, 10% of their time free. And that's part of being a profession, as opposed to just, another trade union. And we as a profession accept that. But there's also a societal obligation to make sure that there's adequate funding. Because, again, the promise we make is equal justice. And we have to make good on that promise. And it's only going to happen if we have the resources. So that's where we are there.
Well, Mr. Zack,
Yes, sir.
according Mr. Zack, first, according to all our, sorry.
Take your time.
I'm Cameron Williams, and after a couple months of the 3R, thanks to the 3R program and a couple months of some law classes, I found my passion of law. So the question I ask you today is, what are some of the qualities that are found in an ideal attorney?
You know, this is a graduation season. And one thing the president of the American Bar does is talks a lot of law school graduations. And that's That's an important question. It's a good question. And the word passion that you use is extremely important, because a lawyer without passion is just a mechanic doing menial things. Okay? And the fact of the matter is that there's actually a fairly simple answer to that question, as you might be surprised, because I've thought about that. And frankly, it's just this, that a good lawyer makes a living. A great lawyer makes a difference. And I will tell you why you should go to law school, sir. You should go to law school because a law degree is one of the most powerful weapons on earth, because it gives you an opportunity to right a wrong. And who else but a lawyer can look at an injustice and do something about it? So I hope you follow your dream. Thank you.
Mr. Zack, with your background and where you come from Cuba, this particular question is one that has been bothering a lot of people, the common folks, not necessarily the attorneys, but relative to language in this country. I mean, we've all been brought up with the fact that our fathers and forefathers all spoke English and learned to read English, and now we're being faced with everything that we're reading being in two languages. And I'd like to hear your opinion about whether we should continue that or we should stop it before it gets completely out of hand.
Well, I think I may be uniquely qualified to answer that question. I live in Miami, which is very close to the United States. I will tell you that when I came to Miami in 1961, it was a small, sleepy southern town. And because of the migration that we had there, it is one of the great international cities of the world. And one of the things that bring people from around the world to Miami is they have a certain level of comfort that they can communicate. And as an American, I know that I go around the world, and we as Americans have the belief, I speak fluent Spanish, but I just came back from Vietnam. I don't speak Vietnamese. And, you kind of feel that everybody should talk English. Matter of fact, I have a good friend that if he goes around the world, and he thinks if he speaks slow enough, everyone understands it. And it says, "Me want go restaurant," and I'm there watching. I mean, I'm telling you that I know some people actually answer him. But the fact is that Hispanics today, and let's talk about that number. Hispanics today are the largest minority in this country. They're 18%. We have a problem in our legal profession, which we're dealing with in our diversity center. We need to talk about the importance of diversity. It's one of the 4 missions of the ABA, to establish diversity not only in our profession but in our society. Only 5% of lawyers are Hispanic. We have 17% of the population. Only 8% are African American. Women, and there is something called the feminization of the practice of law that exists not only in America but around the United States, around the world, and that is over 50% of women are law students today. Everywhere in the world, everywhere you go, it's just not in the United States. And our Women's Commission, first chaired by Hillary Clinton, is one of the proud jewels of the American Bar Association. And when we have time, we'll talk more about that. But I want to get back to your specific question, because we do have a belief that language and the ability to understand from a justice standpoint is important. We have had hearings. I have a Hispanic commission that I've established, which has Senator Mel Martinez, who came over, and Pedro Pan, the same time I came over from Cuba. We have Bill Richardson, Governor Bill Richardson. He and I always debate who has the most Hispanic name. and Emilio Estefan, who is, Gloria Emilio Estefan, who may make more of a difference than any of us, plus Cesar Alvarez, who's well-known and chair of one of the great law firms in this country, plus many other members from around the country. And they've had hearings. We're into our 6th hearing, talking about all these issues. There's a voting issue. There is the ABA, for example, came out strongly opposed to SB 1070. We remain strongly opposed to SB 1070 because it has been the position of the ABA for many, many decades that immigration is a federal issue, and that anything that would lead to racial profiling is something that we would not feel comfortable with. It's been done in the South for too many years against black people, and we've been opposed to it for many, many decades. So we have been opposed to SB 1070. But what we learned in those hearings, to answer, again, your question specifically, is I'll give you Miranda rights as an example. By the way, Mr. Miranda happened to be a Hispanic, just out of happenstance. But the direct translation of a Miranda right that was used was, "This is your opportunity to whitewash your statement." That was the translation. We have to have the ability to have justice for anybody who lives in this country. And this, I don't believe this is a long-term issue, because I think one of the great books you could read today, I just reread it, was John Kennedy's book called A Nation of Immigrants. It was written 50, 60 years ago. Fabulous book. It's about $9 that you can read it on an airplane. But he talks about all the issues and why we're all immigrants in this country and what we've all gone through. And we've gone through a period of time where our grandparents, maybe even our parents, couldn't speak the language, but they learned over time. And anybody who lives in this country over time will learn it. But during that period of time, they have to have justice. And part of justice is knowing what is being asked of them. We should continue to promote English. English is the language of our country. But a lot of people, when they talk about English only, they're not saying English only. All right? There is another message there. And when, in fact, you realize that by the year 2050, 1 out of every 3 Americans will have some form of Hispanic descent, and that we're the 4th largest Spanish-speaking country in the world today, that for us to have the greatness that is within our potential, we need to make a place, as generations before us have made, for all immigrants, and to make them feel comfortable here. One problem the Commission on Women discovered last year is that our minority women, that's been so difficult for us to get into the profession by the pipeline and getting the monies paid and so forth, we're now leaving the profession because we were not putting ourselves in their place and we were not making ourselves accommodating to their needs. Okay, there's a saying about, walking in somebody's shoes. Well, first we got to take off our own shoes before we start walking in their shoes. And we got to start feeling what they feel. And language is just part of what makes America great. We have many, many languages here. You go to Europe, they speak 4 or 5 languages, almost in every country. And the fact that we would speak other languages, I think is a good thing. Matter of fact, my granddaughter today is learning Mandarin because I truly believe if you look at the world that we're going to live in the next 20 years, that's going to be an important language to know. So I don't know if I answered your question directly, but I personally believe, and again, I'm very resident to talk about personal belief because as president, I give up all First Amendment rights during the year I'm president. But it is, so I'm not going to tell you what I personally believe, but I am going to tell you that we're looking at it, and there will be actually a resolution presented at the ABA House of Delegates that will debate this issue. Yes.
Steve.
Yes. Oh, Charna.
Welcome back to Cleveland. We love having you. I have a language question of a different sort. You said earlier on NPR that we need to expand the opportunities to discuss civics around the dining room table of families. And all I could think about was the recent New York Times magazine cover of a family where everyone had a different electronic device, and that's how they were communicating. And I ask you, how do we address the challenges that you've set forth today when the great saying you indicated of our generation, or I'll say your generation, almost my generation, of defending to the death the right of free speech barely fits in to a Twitter message, let alone the complexities of free speech or rule of law or balance of powers? How do we address those issues?
Well, I think any way that you communicate with David that he understands is exactly what I'd continue to do, because he would be my standard. I feel that there's lots of things we can do. For example, Sandra Day O'Connor has something called iCivics. Anybody who has a child should go online and see iCivics. It's games for young people. There's Liberty Kids. That is something that anybody can go online and watch. Fabulous different ways of communicating. We must communicate. You know, Twitter can't control us. We got to control Twitter. And we got to make sure that we're not a society of sound bites. Thank you.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we have been listening to a Friday Forum featuring Stephen Zack, President of the American Bar Association. Thank you very much, Mr. Zack. Thank you very much, Mike Unger and the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association. This forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.